I wanted to start off by bringing up an example of I don't know if you've ever seen the oil light indicator in your car, but if that light comes on, you know, it'd be kind of silly to go into a mechanic and ask him to unplug the light, because really that's a symptom of what's happening. We would more likely take our car in and check for the oil level and see if there's any major leaks. As silly as that may sound, that was my approach to politics. I spent a lot of time discussing symptoms of the problem and not the root of the problem. That all changed for me, however, in 2003. I was actually in a conversation with my father, and we were discussing the war. As you may recall, in March we began war with Iraq, and a lot of that was a major topic of discussion back then, particularly the weapons of mass destruction. And through that conversation, my father asked me, he said, what's the authority, where do we get the authority to be at war with Iraq? I responded, you know, UN Resolution 1441. He said, where do we get the authority to enforce UN resolutions? That I didn't have the answer to. So he encouraged me to go find a copy of the Constitution and read through it and find out if it's in there, being the law of the land. And so I did, and he gave me a little financial incentive and said, you know, while you're at it, look for the word democracy. And so I read through it, couldn't find democracy in there. Figured I'd read it too fast. I went back through and read it a second time. Sure enough, it wasn't in there. And as I was reading, I came upon the section that said that Congress must declare war. And so I started to research that topic, and that really opened the door for me and led me down the path to becoming more familiar with the Constitution. My father also encouraged me to check out the John Birch Society, which I did, and became a member in 2004. Read as much material as I could, watched DVDs. I was just trying to absorb all this information because I felt so inadequate in conversations now concerning this topic. In 2006, I even went so far as to start hosting a course on the Constitution. Not only did I want to learn the material myself, but I wanted to share it with everybody else. I thought this was great stuff. I need to, you know, tell everybody about it. And in 2007, I became employed by the John Birch Society. I submitted my application and was fortunate enough to come on board with this organization that I'm working for now. And I discovered some great things about America and what made it great. And I had a desire to help restore our constitutional republic. Not only did I have this desire, but I ran across a gentleman named de Tocqueville, who was a French historian, philosopher. He came over to America in the early 1800s to discover what made America so great, what made it the most free, prosperous country at that time. And he said that the American people appear to be the most enlightened community. He said there are three things that they're taught. One, they're taught the evidences and the doctrines of their religion. They're taught the history of their country. And they're taught the leading features of its constitution. He said it was extremely rare to find a man imperfectly acquainted with with all these things. And to find someone that was wholly ignorant of them was sort of a miracle. And today it's quite the opposite. To find someone that's vaguely familiar with the Constitution is quite a miracle in itself. And that's the root problem that we deal with in America, an ill-informed electorate. In fact, you can see this reflected in our elected representatives. James Garfield, our 20th President of the United States, said, the people are responsible for the character of the Congress. He said, if that body be ignorant, reckless, and corrupt, it's because people tolerate ignorance, recklessness, and corruption. If that body be intelligent, brave, and pure, it's because the people demand these high qualities. So, you know, it's quite easy to find out where we are. You know, am I part of the informed electorate, the informed voter, or am I part of the problem? You can ask questions like, you know, what congressional district do I live in? Who's my congressman? What kind of legislation is my congressman sponsoring? Here's a good sign of where his heart is, because these are things that he's trying to promote in D.C. Ask what is his recent votes on legislation during his current term. You can ask the same questions of officials at the state level. Who's your state representative? Who's your state senator? Probably my favorite question to ask is, what kind of government do we have? The most popular responses are democracy or democratic republic, But the correct answer is we have a constitutional republic. And it was quite unique when our founding fathers crafted this document. It was unique in that it was written. And we may take that for granted today, but that was unusual back then. It was also unique in that this document governed the government and not the people. This was supposed to rein in the officials that we elected. What also made it unique was that the powers were enumerated. They were listed. And there was a division of these powers, not only vertically but horizontally. So you had the various branches, the legislative, executive, judicial, at the federal, state, and local levels. So what are the leading features of our Constitution? To look at that, we have to start with the Declaration of Independence, because before we get into this document, we had to separate from the government that we were under at the time, which was the rule of the King of England. So if we go to the Declaration of Independence, we see that they stated, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men." So what's the purpose of government? To secure our God-given rights. So once they were able to win our freedom, they crafted this constitutional republic in order to protect these freedoms. And if you look at the Constitution, it contains 7 articles. Now, over half of the Constitution is within the first article. So you got to think, this is a pretty important section. Well, that article, Article 1, deals with the legislative branch. And in there, Article 1, Section 1, Sentence 1 states, "All legislative power herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives." So if all legislative power is vested in Congress, how much is left over for the courts or for the president? None. Another key to this is herein granted. Not only was legislative power vested in Congress, but only the power that was granted within this Constitution. So there are limits to the power of the legislative branch. In Section 2, you'll see that the House of Representatives had the sole power of impeachment. In Section 3, talking about the Senate, they had the sole power to try on impeachments. And this is the body that we would work through if we want to remove a government official. Moving to Section 4, you see it says, "The Congress shall assemble at least once every year." And that's kind of funny to me. When I first read that, I'm like, why would you have to tell somebody they'd have to meet at least once every year? They seem like they meet all year long as it is. Well, when we get to Section 8, we see that there's very limited things that they can do. They would run out of stuff that would occupy the time. So they had to put in there, you guys got to at least come together once a year. In Section 7, it talks about all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. This is very key in looking at the financial burdens that we face as a nation today. People are concerned about the budget or the raising of the debt ceiling. We need to understand that the House of Representatives is the first body that ever makes that step to allow the spending to take place. If the House does not originate funding, it doesn't happen. Programs can get shut down, wars can cease to continue, whole departments will cease to exist. But you know, that takes a lot for a body to do that, because we're so accustomed to what we're accustomed to today. Article 1, Section 8 is the listing of the powers for Congress. At the beginning, there's a general statement, and then there's a listing of powers, and then there's another statement at the end. The beginning statement says, "Congress shall provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States." This is one of those clauses that they use to excuse their actions in D.C. that aren't really constitutional. And here, if you go to the Federalist Papers, which is a series of editorials written in newspapers by delegates from the convention in Philadelphia, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, they wrote these so that the people would understand what was in this document in order to ratify it. So James Madison actually addresses this general welfare clause. He stated in Federalist Papers number 41 that for what purpose could the enumeration of particular powers be inserted if these and all others were meant to be included in the preceding general powers? Nothing is more natural nor more common then first to use a general phrase and then to explain and qualify it by a recital of particulars. So here he's saying that this general welfare is just a general statement, and we're about to list the specific powers of Congress. When we go and look further in Section 8, we can see that Congress has the power to regulate commerce among the several states. And here the point of regulating commerce was to prevent the states from abusing each other by placing additional taxes and things that cross their borders. So if Virginia was selling something to somebody in Georgia, North Carolina and South Carolina may want to add some additional taxes to it so they could benefit from it just traveling to their states. Congress said, the crafters at the time said this was not good. We need to keep that from happening, so we'll put this as part of the power for the legislative branch at the federal level to stop that. It says to coin money and regulate the value thereof. It doesn't mention anything about a Federal Reserve or national banks, paper money. It talks about to establish post offices and post roads. I think we have that pretty well covered at this point. Declare war. This is the thing that got me started. When I looked at it, we had only declared war officially 5 times since our beginning. First one was the War of 1812, then the Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, and World War II. And as I began to look, I noticed that Korea, Vietnam, Kosovo, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, none of these were constitutional wars. Our founding fathers also talked about armies and navies, and they actually split them up. You can see for the armies, they said to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. We got to remember, we came from a time when there was a standing army. British troops were on our soil. They wanted to prevent that from happening again. So there was not going to be a standing army. If there was a need for one, we'd raise one up, and we'd only appropriate funding for a short period of time. The Navy, however, you can't build ships in a short period if they're needed. So that's why they said in the next sentence to provide and maintain a Navy. So it's important to understand the differences between those. And then in Section 8, at the end, it says to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. There's another one of those clauses, necessary and proper, that people like to use. And they like to stop at that point. But the remainder of the sentence says, for carrying into execution the powers that we just listed off and gave you. So those are the only laws that they have a right to pass. Looking at Section 9, this is the section that deals with the things that are forbidden to Congress. Among them, no bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. So we couldn't pass retroactive bills. Section 10 deals with the things that were forbidden to the states. We see here that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. Going to Section 2, Article 2, which deals with the executive branch, we find that the executive power is vested in a president. And before he actually takes office, he must take an oath or affirmation to preserve, protect, and defend this document. This is the thing that he needs to uphold. It says the president shall be commander-in-chief when the Army, Navy, and militia are called into the actual service of the United States. So it's important to understand that he's not automatically commander-in-chief at all times, and he can take, the forces anywhere he wants to. In Section 3 of Article 2, it says the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. I know very well that there are laws on the books that deal with people that come across our borders and tax our hospitals, our school systems, our employment, means of employment that aren't being executed right now by the president. Moving to Article 3, this deals with the judicial branch. In Section 1 it says, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as a Congress may ordain and establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their office during good behavior. Doesn't mention lifetime appointments. We often think that they're in there for life and there's nothing we can do. there's actually been more judges that have been removed, been impeached, than presidents. In fact, just a little tidbit, here in Florida, there was a federal district judge that got impeached, and now he is the congressman of Congressional District 23, Representative Hastings. It goes back to seeing that, you know, the representatives are a reflection of us and what we tolerate. You also hear the idea of co-equal branches. Well, Alexander Hamilton in Federalist Paper 78 addressed that. He said the judiciary may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm, even for the efficacy of its judgments. So if you look at the Supreme Court ruling, you'll say the opinion of the Supreme Court. And if they want to carry out one of their rulings to enforce those, they have to rely on the judicial branch. It's really the weakest. As he continues to say, the simple view of the matter suggests several important consequences. It proves incontestably that the judiciary is beyond comparison the weakest of the three departments of power. So co-equal branches is really kind of a myth. Going to Section 2 of Article 3, says the judiciary power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution and the laws of the United States and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority. Again, you have this reference to the boundaries of the Constitution. They're not allowed to rule outside of the Constitution and laws and treaties made within those parameters. In Article 4, Section 4, it states, the United States shall guarantee in every state of this Union a Republican form of government. So not only do we have a Republican form of government at the federal level, every state that entered into this Union must have a Republican form of government as well. And shall protect each of them against invasion. It doesn't say armed invasion, military invasion, but you think about the people that come across this country illegally, those would constitute an invasion. And again, you know, we shouldn't see the executive branch suing states like Arizona. They should be helping them out by preventing this stuff from happening. In Article 6, it states, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. So what's the supreme law of the land? Constitution and laws and treaties that are made under the authority of the Constitution. Someone passes a law that goes beyond the bounds of the Constitution. Is it a just law? Should it be considered the supreme law of the land? Technically, no. I'm not advocating here that we should go out and just disregard those things. We need to take the proper steps to rein in the government from the areas that it has stepped beyond. And finally, the senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath of affirmation to support this Constitution. So all elected and appointed officials at the federal, state, and local level, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, are all bound to an oath to support, defend, and protect this Constitution, this law of the land. Now, the Constitution probably would not have been ratified if there wasn't an agreement to add some additional prohibitions. Now, I say prohibitions, most people think of these as Bill of Rights, but as we saw in the Declaration of Independence, these documents didn't give us any rights at all. Our rights came from our Creator. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to further rein in the federal government. And here, when they introduced these amendments to be reviewed and ratified, there was a little preamble, and in it it stated, the conventions of the members of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers that further declaratory and restrictive clauses shall be added. So let's take a look. The First Amendment, always one of those famous ones people talk about. Can you tell what the key to this First Amendment is? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So if someone stands up at a high school graduation and offers a prayer, did Congress pass a law? No. Can the First Amendment technically be violated? No. What if a principal stands up before a high school auditorium, or think of any situation where someone stands up and says a prayer. If Congress doesn't pass a law concerning these things, can the First Amendment be violated? We're hoodwinked into believing that when the ACLU presses for a lawsuit, that there must be some validity to the separation of church and state, but it simply doesn't exist if we read just the text of the First Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure, shall not be violated but upon probable cause. If you look at the provisions that recently got extended in the Patriot Act that violate the Fourth Amendment, you have to ask yourself, how does this take place? And you go through, and that's where you do the gut check and go, how did my congressman vote? How did I, approach him when this was up for a vote? How did I respond to him if he voted incorrectly? It all comes back to us. It's like holding up a mirror. And trust me, I got 6 kids. I have mirrors around me all day long. It's not pretty, but it lets you know what the work needs to be done. The Ninth Amendment talks about the enumeration. There's that word, listing again. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So just because we listed some of the rights doesn't mean that there aren't a ton of others. And the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. James Madison also had something to say about this in Federalist Paper number 45. He said the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The former will be exercised principally on external objects as war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce, with which last the power of taxation will, for the most part, be connected, referring to tariffs. So the powers reserved to the states will extend to all the objects which, in the ordinary course of affairs, concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, and the internal order and improvement and prosperity of the state. So we see various examples where the federal government has encroached on our lives, liberties, and properties. They have no jurisdiction, and James Madison clearly states so. So you look at the things that the federal government's involved in: foreign aid, Federal Reserve, housing, medicine, education, transportation, energy, agriculture. We've come so far from this little document here. How do we get back to this point? How do we go from here to here? I think our founding fathers gave us an answer. George Washington actually mentioned it in his farewell address. Thomas Jefferson stated it like this. He said, experience has shown that even under the best forms of government, those entrusted with power have, in time and by slow operations, perverted it into tyranny. And it is believed that the most effectual means of preventing this would be to illuminate the minds of the people. It's education. Said a little differently. Later on, he said, I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. He said, if they're not enlightened enough, we should educate them. He said, education is the true corrective of the abuses of constitutional power. And that's what we're dealing with. All branches of government abusing their constitutional power. The way to correct this is through an educational effort. I think James Madison said it best when he stated, although all men are born free and all nations might be so, yet too true it is that slavery has been the general lot of the human race. Ignorant, they have been cheated. Asleep, they have been surprised. Divided, the yoke has been forced upon them. But what is the lesson? That because the people may betray themselves, that they ought to give themselves up blindfolded to those who have an interest in betraying them? Rather conclude that the people ought to be enlightened, to be awakened, to be united, that after establishing a government, they should watch over it. We see here education in the Enlightenment. We see organization and being united. And we see monitoring of our elected officials by watching over it. There is only one way to get back to a constitutionally limited government, and that is by creating that informed electorate. Once we do that, we're able to have a body that will monitor the constitutionality of the votes that take place. We'll also have people that will influence their elected representatives to vote constitutionally on future legislation. And they will refuse to elect someone that will violate their Constitution on a continual basis. I'm sad to say my congressman in his 12th term is 70% in line with the Constitution, but he's continually violated his Constitution over his many terms. There is no easy way. There's no shortcuts. We tend to look for an easy way out, but we have to go back and relay the foundations. Sam Adams, the leader in the original Tea Party and signer of the Declaration of Independence, said, "If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin." The John Birch Society is the longest standing and most experienced grassroots organization in the constitutional freedom movement. Robert Welch, our founder, designed a program to help create that informed electorate. We've found out, it's been our experience, that when 500 patriots follow this method within a congressional district, we can see a congressman voting differently. The challenge has always been creating that necessary critical mass in a majority of the districts to make that difference. But once we are able to do that, we can see that we'll have a Congress that will only enact laws within the framework of the Constitution. They'll go back and they'll repeal unconstitutional laws. They'll stop funding of programs that have no constitutional authority. They'll limit the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, and they'll cancel out executive orders that go beyond the President's jurisdiction. The John Birch Society is poised with a wealth of resources, all from a constitutional perspective. We have paid field staff that goes throughout the country and coordinates the efforts of members and chapters. Our chapters actually follow a monthly bulletin that has an action plan. If you look through there, you'll see highlighted areas of action steps that they can take. Probably the most popular section in here is the pending legislation, where we go through and we talk about current legislation and the constitutionality of that legislation, and request that our members and chapters contact their representatives and ask them to support or oppose based on the constitutional position of the different legislation. We also have a news analysis magazine. As you can see on this cover, the 112th Congress, who will adhere to the Constitution. In here there's many good articles. There's Goodness of America. This section here talks about the good things that people do. You know, we don't only want to hear about all the bad stuff in America, but we want to hear the good that takes place as well. We also have a section called Exercising the Right that discusses how the use of people exercising their Second Amendment freedoms has stopped, prevented crime. Also, we have historical sections. We see here in this issue, it talks about the Founding Fathers and what they thought about health care. What would they say, you know, when it came to Obamacare and if it came up for a vote during their time. And then there's issues such as Obama making signing statements saying that he's going to ignore the defunding of certain czars that the legislative branch is trying to rein in. Great information. We'll at times have issues that we want a wider distribution, so we'll have reprints that we'll have available for purchase to get out to people. There's also a Freedom Index that comes out twice a year in our magazine. We'll make these available as reprints. We'll evaluate the positions of congressmen, again talking about the constitutional position of the legislation, and then we'll list how they voted, so you'll know, how faithful is my congressman to his oath. And we do the same thing for the senators. We have a legislative action alerts that we can do online, pre-written emails that you can send. You can modify them any way you would like. There's also extensive research facility and library that's available to us that we use in documenting everything that we put out, so you can, feel comfortable in passing this information out. We have a book publishing department. We put out books on various topics. We'll have booklets as well on talking about the restoration of rights for the states and the people. In here, I think it's so important to show that not only do we talk about the issue at hand, but what can we do to make a difference. It'll list 10 different things in the back of this book that we can take action on and help turn things around. Things dealing with the John Birch Society itself, realities versus myth, republic if you can keep it. And here's a story of Davy Crockett and where he violated his oath. And he went out in his district seeking re-election, came across a farmer named Horatio Bunce. And Horatio said, don't come seeking a vote from me. I know what you did. And he proceeded to share with David Crockett the story of his voting to appropriate money for things that were outside his jurisdiction. David Crockett realized that he was correct, and so he went around to various places in his district apologizing to people and stating that if they were to re-elect him again, that he would not make the same mistake. Sure enough, he got reelected, and sure enough, another piece of legislation came up that was very similar in nature, and he voted it down, and he explained why and shared that story. We also have video and audio production, where we put out DVDs and CDs, some of them on economics, talking about some people that we hear about. The real Newt Gingrich just talks about things that he says and his actual voting records. What has he done? Do they match up? Very interesting. Dangers of a Constitutional Convention. Our most popular DVD, Overview of America, which talks about the basics of different governmental systems and economic systems. We have speakers that go throughout the country and discuss issues like economics and terrorism and immigration. And we have youth programs designed to build that appreciation for our heritage. We also have affiliated organizations. The New American, we have an online website with daily news feeds, shopjbs.org, our online store, producing materials all from a constitutional viewpoint available for people to read and view. Liberty News Network, this is our video website. We'll put our videos from that we currently put out and from the past on this site. We also have other videos from other organizations that have a similar liberty-minded approach. American Opinion Foundation, this is our tax-free organization that oversees the Freedom Project and Campus Liberty Alliance. Freedom Project is putting out a K-12 curriculum, online courses. Our Campus Liberty Alliance is our college outreach. Going back to the Declaration of Independence, we see that our founding fathers mutually pledged to each other their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. I would ask for you today to consider putting part of your times, talents, and treasures towards the restoration of our constitutional republic. Daniel Webster made a plea to his generation. He said, "Hold on, my friends, to the Constitution and the republic for which it stands. Miracles do not cluster, and what has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again. We have truly been blessed with the gift of liberty, and we must understand that our right to be free comes with a responsibility to guard those freedoms and pass them on to our children and grandchildren." Again, I would ask that you consider putting part of your resources towards the restoration of our constitutional republic. Join the John Birch Society. Become part of something bigger than yourselves. Be a part of building this 500 Patriots within your congressional district and work to make a difference today.